Okay, so in the previous tutorial, we added this feature where you can actually toggle in between multiple different camera states, right? And currently we have this smooth transition in between those states, right? So let's further improve this camera system. And today I'm sort of like focusing on to implement combat close-up cameras and weapon aimings, right? Uh, so as a start, what we can do is we can open up our camera manager, right? And the data table for camera. So here you can see like currently we have a close-up camera in the range of 200, but I think this is too much closer to the character. uh, Maybe let's make it as 350. Let's test this thing. Okay, now it seems okay, right? So what I wanted to do is basically whenever I equip a weapon, it should automatically go to that close-up camera state, right? Instead of manually toggling to that state, it should go to that state automatically, right? Uh, so let's see how we can do that, right? So let's go to a weapon base, and here we have a blueprint interface function called BPI equip, right? So here basically we set the weapon uh, visibilities, attach to characters, set the name sets, and play the equipping montage. All those stuffs are happening here. And I think uh, here before playing this montage stuff, maybe we can call the update camera function, right? So here like we have the set camera state function. Based on that, actually we can set that specific camera state, right? So I'll call the get player camera manager BFL utility function, right? Not the default engine provided function, but the customized function that we created. So if you forget where we implemented this function, basically like we have a blueprint function library called utilities, and there I created this pure function, right? It follows the same naming convention that the Unreal Engine used to get the play camera manager, but ideally it returns our own camera manager as the reference, right? Okay, then let's set the camera state like this, right? But the issue is like if I directly set the close-up camera state here like this, you can see even if I'm at the unarmed state, it goes directly to that close-up camera, you see, because this is a weapon base and all of those unarmed melee weapons and firearm weapons are by default is having this camera state, right? That's why it directly goes to the close-up camera. But instead of doing such things, what I need is on the firearm weapons, it goes to the close-up camera, and on the melee weapons, it simply stays at the medium camera, right, which is the default camera state, right? So in order to distinguish in between those states, I think maybe we can further improve our weapon config data structure, right? So let's go to the data structures weapon. Let's open up the weapon config, and I'll add a new variable called camera state, right? This should be the type of camera e-camera stick. Right, now if you go to the weapon base and get the weapon config, and let's break it, and here now I have the input called camera state, so I'll plug that thing to here. Right, and then let's go to the firearm weapon base, and under the weapon config I'll make the camera state as close-up camera, because at the firearm weapons like pistol and rifle it should go to the close-up camera, and for melee weapons by default it will stay at the medium camera, right, which is the default camera state. Okay, now let's test this thing. Now you can see actually it stays at the medium camera at the unarmed mode, and whenever we equip a rifle it goes to that close-up camera state, and if I switch back to the default unarmed mode it goes back to the medium camera state, right? You can see that transition happen, right? Plus I think when it goes to the close-up camera state, the camera should move somewhat right. Otherwise, like when we are aiming, actually we can't aim it properly, right? Because it's sort of intersecting with the player character mesh, right? But for melee weapons like swords and stuff, we don't need to necessarily aim, right? Because we are simply attacking. So we can have like a middle camera like this. But for firearm weapons like this, I think we should move our camera a little bit to the right side. Okay, so in order to manipulate the location of the camera, we can do that on the camera manager, right? So currently I have this update spring arm length event. And similarly, let's add a new event called update camera location, right? And there also what I have to do is somewhat similar thing that I've been done here. So let's get the camera reference, and I'll convert it to validated get, and then we can add a timeline, and I'll call this one as tm underscore camera location, and as the track I will add a float track which returns the alpha value, and I'll use the same curve which is CF generic camera curve, right? Then let's go back to the event. So instead of playing it from the post position, let's play from the start, and then I need to manipulate the camera's relative location. So let's get the relative location of the camera and linear interpolate in between vectors. So as the second vector, I'm going to provide the new input called target camera location, maybe. And then I can set back the relative location of the camera once it updates per frame. And as the alpha value, I can provide whatever the alpha value given by this timeline. Plus we can control its play rate as well, like we did here. So let's get the TM camera location timeline, and I'll call this set play rate function, and let's parameterize this new rate, and I'll call it as play rate. Right, and then let's go back to set camera state, and now we can call that update camera location function. And so this is the data structure that this data table implements, right? As you can see, like there are multiple different records which I had earlier. So we have camera state, spring arm length, and we have camera location field, right? So we can use whatever the value provided by this field to manipulate the new target camera location. So I'll use that one and plug it to here. Also the play rate, I can plug it directly, whatever the play rate we have. Right. Now let's give it a location. So for the close-up camera, I will give it like 0, 0, no, maybe 0, 50 and 80. This will do the trick. Right, now if I play it and let's equip a rifle. Okay, now you can see actually the location is also transitioned smoothly, right? So if I go to the unarmed state, it go back to that state, and our location is again middle. If I equip rifle back, it sort of goes to that close-up camera, right? And then the location is somewhat changed. Right. Plus I think for the medium camera also we can add sort of a C offset. So the medium camera I will add like 50 as C, and let's see this value is okay. Yeah, now like for the medium camera also we have sort of a C offset, right? So the character is not directly on the middle of the viewport. Instead, like it's sort of at the bottom, right? Which looks good. And if I keep the rifle, the character somewhat goes back to the left side, but actually what happened is like the camera go to the right side, right? So we have this nice transition, which is much more realistic. Okay, and next we can add the aiming camera, right? So to do that, first I will add a new state to this data table, and I can select the camera state as this aiming camera, right? If you forget where we implemented this stuff, basically like we have enumeration called eCamera state. There I defined all of those relevant camera states that I found much more convenient, right? So now we add this one, which is aiming camera, and I'll rename the row as aiming camera, and for the spring arm length I think it should be much more smaller, so I'll give it like 150, and the location also should be much more goes to the right side, so I'll give it a camera location like -10, 18 and 90, right? Again, actually these values are some convenient values that I came up, right? But based on your requirement, you can tweak these values, right? That's totally fine. And I think like these values would be nice in our specific implementation, right? So we have this stuff. Then what we can do is we should consume an input to make a transition to aiming camera, right? So to do that, let's go to the input and let's add a new enhanced input action called IA aim, and this should consume two triggers, which is pressed and released. And let's add this to the input mapping context. I'll select IAM, and the input should be the right mouse button. Okay, ignore this stuff, that would be fine. And now let's go to the character player base. Right, so inside the player base we have one for fiery, and similarly let's add a, or let's consume that IAA, right? Okay, so similarly what we have been done here, we can create an event called toggle aim, right? So that we can use the same function to make the transition, right? So let's go to the BP camera base and I'll create a new event called toggle aim. Okay. And we do this toggle aim only if we have a valid current slot at our weapon system. Also, I should check whether we pressed it or not, or pressed or released. So let's consume a boolean input call is pressed. And we should implement another blueprint interface function called BPI-aim. So let's go to the BPI events interface, and there I'll implement a new function called BPI aim. Let's send it to the weapons category. And as the input, it should consume whatever that boolean value. So in our case, it's is pressed. Compile and save, and let's go to the camera, the character base, and let's call that BPI aim. And let's pass this is pressed to there. And this is the character base implementation. So let's go back to the player base and I'll call that toggle aim on started as it is pressed, and after completed this should release it. So the is pressed is false. So I'll comment these two stuffs as well. Okay, now let's go to the weapon base. Or like we can directly go to the firearm weapon base, because I think in my case I'm not going to implement melee aiming, right? Because only when I'm equipped the rifle or pistol sort of a firearm weapon, I'm going to implement the aiming, right? Therefore, instead of implementing on the weapon base, let's go to the BPI firearm weapon base and implement that specific blueprint interface function. So if you check out the BPI interfaces weapons category, we have this BPI aim. So I'll open that thing, and yeah, and here let's implement this function. Right, so first I should check, I should state whether I'm aimed or not. So I'll promote this to variable called is aiming, right? And then yeah, let's check whether I'm aiming or not. And if I'm aiming, I should do the strafing, I believe, right? As the rotation mode, right? So I'll copy these two stuff from the BPI file and paste it to here, because if I'm aiming, I should do the rotation mode of strafing instead of forward facing, so that the character is actually looking to whatever the aim direction that I have. And if I release the aiming, which means if I'm not aiming, it should go back to the whatever the previous rotation mode that it inherited, right? Okay. And then ideally it should update the camera state, right? So let's get the player camera manager from the BFA utilities. So you see, like, the benefit of having blueprint function library functions, right? Because those functions can be generally called at any actor blueprint that we have, right? Because those are globally available functions, so that we don't actually need to redefine this stuff again and again in multiple different instances, right? Okay, so let's set the camera state. If I'm aiming, I'll go to the aiming camera. If I'm not aiming, I'll go back to the close-up camera. Right. Hope that's clear. This is the rotations and this is the camera state transitions. So let's test. So let's equip a rifle, and if I press aim, I can see actually the character is aiming to that direction, plus he's rotating accordingly, right? And also the camera location has been changed, right? Okay. And let's say if I equipped a melee weapon, then the aiming doesn't work there, right? Because I haven't implemented that BPI aim interface functionality at melee weapons, right? So for melee weapons you can't actually aim, right? But for the firearm weapons you can aim, right? Which is what ideally we wanted, right? And now let's say when you are firing, actually your character is not overlap, actually your line trace is not overlapping with the character, right? Instead, like, you can now properly aim towards a specific target, right? Okay, right. So that's what I wanted to cover in this section, and in the next episode we can implement sort of like the rest of the camera states. For instance, like there are two camera states that I left off, which is far camera and the sprint camera. So the sprint camera we can use to like make some camera transitions when the character is sprinting, and far camera we can use to some, you know, when the character is interacting with sort of like explorative object, or maybe when the character is goes to inside a vehicle, right? So anyway, I'll cover those stuff in the next episode. I'll see you there. Thank you.